Hey guys, welcome to another SAT video, and today we're going to be covering grammar and reading strategies. Not all of these will work for you, but they have worked for me, so I'm just going to recommend them. So first we have annotating the questions and passages. So annotating is really important so that we can emphasize what to look for. So in a question, I like to usually underline some keywords in the questions itself and also in the answer choices. So say I have two answer choices left and I want to find the right answer. I want to find the wrong answer, and that's the second strategy. But say I want to find the weaker answer, I would underline certain words that would make one weaker over the other. So at the end of the day, underlining really helps narrow things down, and annotating, it helps narrow things down. And while taking the test, it really just helps you because you can, instead of looking through the passage and forgetting where you found that piece of information, instead you can underline that important piece of information right when you're reading it and go back to it when you're answering the questions. So now the second strategy is looking for the wrong answers. So your first thought, or your first, well, in a multiple choice test, you might find an answer that you particularly like over the others. But in the SAT, you don't want to look for the right answer, but you want to look for the wrong one. So usually there are two answers that are way off, and there are two answers that are similar to that. There are two answers that could be right. But at the end of the day, there's obviously only one. But while looking for these wrong answers, you want to eliminate those two like way off answers right off the bat, so that you have a narrow view and you don't need to focus on many things such as four answers. So these answer choices you can eliminate right when looking at them, because when you read the passage, you're going to know that you didn't read this. And for this reason, you don't really need to understand the passage as a whole. You just need to know what you read and what you didn't read. So, say I have a question that says, what color are giraffes? Obviously, this is a factual question, but let's say the answer choices are giraffes are pink, or giraffes have a tan and brown color, and giraffes are green, and giraffes are red. So, because of this, we know that giraffes aren't green and aren't red. So we can eliminate those two right off the bat. And when we get back to those other two answers, we have a giraffe is red and a giraffe is tan and brown. So obviously it isn't red, and this also could be considered as a way off answer choice. But almost always the answer choice is going to be these last two answer choices. One of them will be the right answer, and one of them will be the trick answer. So basically, the College Board wants you to be tricked by this answer and choose it, whereas in reality, you're gonna get that answer wrong. So for this reason, you want to look for the wrong answers, and to look for the wrong answers, you're gonna have to look for the weaker traits, or what's weak about this answer, or what you don't like. Uh, Whereas like looking at what you do like about the answer, because that can mess you up big time. And looking for the wrong answer in a multiple choice test like the SAT would just be a more safe method, because you're traversing through all the answers and you're finding the false in each answer. So now let's look at strategy 3. So let me change this, instead of methods to questions. So there are different types of questions on the SAT. There's obviously, let's focus on the reading part for now. There are vocab and context. There's command of evidence. and they're a bunch of rhetoric questions, as I like to call it, or uh, questions that really test your comprehension of the passage. So, at least for me, command of evidence questions were the hardest because I just didn't have the right strategy to go for them. And because of that, every practice test I took, I would always notice that I would be getting these command of evidence questions wrong. So I decided to see where I was going wrong and practice these questions so I wouldn't get them wrong in the long term. And as I did that, I realized I was making less and less command of evidence mistakes while taking these practice tests. So practice focusing on questions that you're weak at really helps, because what's the point of focusing on questions that you're like strong at? Because there's really no point. You're just practicing what you already know. But practicing questions that you're weak at will help you because you're improving your ability. And now we have the fourth strategy, and this is split questions into two. So this does not apply to every question, obviously, but I have a sample question right here. We have, over the course of the passage, the main focus of the narrative shifts from the and then all of the answer choices. But as you can see, you can split these answer choices into two. So we have, let's look at answer choice A. We have reservations a character has about a person he has just met, to a growing appreciation that character has of the person's worth. So we notice it talks about two different things: the reservations a character has and the appreciation that the character has. So these are the two different parts, and that's why I like to split the questions. So I like to split it right next to the two, so we can just generalize this. So this is the first part of the answer choice, this is the second part. And this really helps you because you know that if you read the passage and you knew that reservations, because we're looking for the wrong choice, if we knew that reservations a character has about a person he has just met is not mentioned in the question at all, you don't even need to look at the second part because this first part's already wrong. So we can eliminate it and move on to the next. Because why waste time when you can just save time and move on to the next one? Now we have ambivalence a character feels about a sensitive nature, to the character's recognition of the advantages of having profound emotions. So now ambivalence may be correct. And by the way, this is a question I took from a College Board SAT passage on the College Board website. And I do not know the right answer because I didn't read the passage, but I'm just using this question as a model to show my implementations of my strategies. So we have ambivalence a character feels about his sensitive nature. And what if this might be correct? So this might be correct in the passage. This might have occurred in the passage. So this is correct. But if we go into the second part, to the character's recognition of the advantages of having profound emotions. Now, pretend I read the passage. I know that I did not read this. So this first part was, well, it was good. It was pretty good. But the second part, I did not like at all. So we know that even though I liked the first part, I didn't like the second part. Therefore, this is not the right answer either. But now we have intensity of feeling a character has for another person, to the character's concern that that intensity is not reciprocated. So now we can do the same thing again. We read this part and this part, and we just do the same thing for every question. And even if you find that, even if you think that C might be the right answer before even looking at D, you always want to look at D, because who knows? D or C might be a lot weaker than D is. So you always want to look at what you have, because it's like wasting a resource. You have this resource, and you want to just double check that the answer you got was right. And that's where we go on to the strategy of try every possibility. I'm going to be skipping a bit, but this is strategy 7, so we have to try every possibility. So trying every possibility, as I mentioned before, is very important, because who knows, you might have missed the answer the first try, and just looking at every possibility is sort of a check to you knowing that you got the right answer. And it is also comforting, because say I just stopped at C and didn't look at D, and sometimes you have to do this if you don't have much time. You're not going to be as comforted as if you looked at D as well, because if you looked at D, then if D was a lot weaker or just weaker than C, you would be comfortable with your answer choice, whereas if you didn't look at D, you wouldn't be as comfortable, because you know that D might have been a possible answer choice as well. We got this, we got this, this. Okay, now let's go to 5. So skip one question per passage. And a lot of people talk about how the SAT is a test where if you get the question right, you get a point. But if you get it wrong, you don't lose anything. You don't lose a point, because you only gain points for questions you get right, but you never lose points in the SAT. And that's why it's important to skip one question per passage. At the end of the day, all questions have the same worth. So a vocab and context, I'll call this VC, will have the same worth as a command of evidence, I'll call this CE. Will have the same worth. It's still going to be 1 point in the raw score. So say one question is taking you a lot of time and you have to look through the passage again to find your answer. You can skip that question and move on to questions that might be simpler, because after all, you're not going to be losing points if you just skip that question. And unless you're targeting for a 1600 score, getting every question right is not always going to happen, and you have to be prepared for that. So that's why you should skip one question per passage, because at the end of the day, you're going to have, or at the end of the passage, you're going to have more time. So you can go back to that question and check. Whereas if you didn't skip this question, you would be wasting a lot of time. And with that time, you might have got more questions correct than the question you were spending time on. Now, this is really just for grammar. And this is a very important part, and you really can't go without it. So strategy 6 is knowing your grammar rules, and knowing your grammar rules is really important because the grammar section, as its name, really tests grammar and writing skills and a bunch of other parts, but a lot of I would say probably 40% of the questions really test the grammar part. And that's why you need to know your grammar rules. So I know Khan Academy really helps with grammar rules. So you could learn about modifier placement or verb noun agreement. Subject noun agreement. So there are a bunch of grammar rules that are out there, and I'm really stressing this because it's really important in the grammar part. But knowing every grammar rule will just help you, because you're going to feel confident. And if you know these grammar rules, you can get each question right just like that, because you're going to be confident in your answer, and you're going to be spending less time on each question. So you can spend that time on other questions where it might be harder, and it's not testing really the grammar straight, like those straight grammar rules, but more of those like writing skills and those long questions. So now let's go to having patience. So unless you're just a genius and get a 1600 on the first try, having patience is really important because you're not always going to get the score you want. And for that reason, you're going to have to practice, and you have to find your faults, and you also have to take practice tests as well. And because doing all of this takes a lot of patience. And without this patience, you're never going to get the score you want, because without the patience, you won't have enough. Without the patience, you just won't want to do it anymore. And SAT takes practice. Therefore, you have to do it almost not every day, but you have to do it consistently to the point where you can go to the testing center and feel confident of every question. So that's why we have to have patience. And another part I'll add is having confidence. So you don't want to go into the SAT in that mindset of, I'm going to fail this test. I will never get put the score I want to. And if you go into that mindset, you're setting yourself up for failure. Whereas I like to go into the mindset where I just say to myself, I'm going to do well, but even if I don't do good, that's okay, because I always have a next time. And this really just helps cool you down and make you less nervous about the test. And a lot of these, try every possibility, have patience, look for wrong answers, and uh, and have confidence can apply to the math section as well, and just every section in the SAT. So I hope you guys like this video, and if you do, please like and subscribe. And if you guys have any questions or video recommendations, please comment. Thank you.